Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
The other day I got an angry email from a used car salesman. I upset a used car salesman, and I didn't even know I did it. And I'm so I'm so flabbergasted. I upset a used car salesman. And 31 years of practicing law, suing used car dealerships, new car dealerships, and car manufacturers. I've upset a few people in the car industry along the way. So it's actually not that surprising that I upset a used car salesman, except that I upset him with an article that I wrote something like 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I wrote something that this man was upset by. And it turns out the people at Jalopnik, I wrote for Jalopnik for a few years. And I wrote quite a few articles for them. And Jalopnik has a thing they call the front page. And when an article went up, it would go up on the front page and it would slowly move down the page. And then other articles would come in and displace it. And eventually you'd be way down the page. But if you went to Jalopnik, you could start scrolling and just scroll and keep scrolling and scrolling and see all the articles that go back. And you could also search them by subject and author and things of that nature. And so I would write articles for them at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And some of the articles got a lot of attention and got word out there on various things I like to talk about. And apparently recently, Jalopnik has decided to start recycling some of that material. And I don't have any problem at all with them doing this. I just didn't know they were doing it. And I got about 5 or 6 people who contacted me and said, Steve, I saw the article you wrote on Jalopnik today. And I haven't written for them for a few years. And I said, I haven't written anything for Jalopnik in a while. Why? What does it say? And they told me, and I recognized it as an article I wrote 7 years ago. And then I got this vitriolic email from a used car salesman who was very upset with my article. And all I could think is, look at the date of the article. It's 7 years old, and you're now getting upset by it. And I had to go reread the article to find out what may have upset this guy. And I just came to the conclusion that he's upset because he's a used car salesman. And he's probably upset every day of his life. But the headline of the article that I wrote that was published 7 years ago and then more recently republished, it says, should you consider buying a former rental car? Question mark. Probably not. Have you ever driven a rental car? That should explain it all. By Steve Lehto at jalopnik.com. Have you ever considered buying a former rental car? I personally am against it, but hey, you can do whatever you want. Just know what you're getting into first. Now, is there anything about that paragraph that should upset somebody? Have you ever considered buying a former rental car? Well, that's rhetorical. I personally am against it. That's my opinion. If that upsets you, you got problems. But hey, you can do whatever you want. Well, I'm telling you, you can do whatever you want. Does that upset you? Just know what you're getting into first. Isn't that good advice for life? Know what you're getting into first, if you can. Rental car companies buy fleets of vehicles. That's true. They rent them to people who treat them like shopping carts or worse, and then eventually sell them off. Also true. They end up on used car lots somewhere. Some rental companies even advertise they'll sell you the cars directly. These are all true statements. You can't get upset at this. The pro-buying argument goes like this. The fleets get regular maintenance and are generally rented by business folk who treat the cars kindly. Well, that is an argument people make, and I wrote the anti-buying argument goes like this. Have you ever driven a rental car? Exactly. Of course, you have no idea which of the cars in the fleet were abused, and it may be that a particular example is only rented by kindly and safe drivers who treated the car as they would treat their own. But there are a few things we do know from studying this question. Rental car companies are famous for not doing anything which leads to a car having downtime. I have spoken to many people who've worked in the rental car industry, and they've told me that when the computer flags a car and says it needs an oil change today, and somebody comes in and goes, I need a rental car, and they've only got that one car, they'll rent it and they'll change the oil later. This means that a car in a fleet could very likely not have had recalls performed on it. That's common. Even if the recalls are safety related. Perhaps they were performed at the end of its time in the fleet, or perhaps not. Do you think they pull cars out of rotation for oil changes during tourist season when every car is spoken for? What about Carfax? Depending on what insurance kicked in to cover the damage some Yahoo did to the car, it may or may not even show up in Carfax, and that's a fact also. Carfax does not catch everything. It is also noteworthy that buyers were so averse to buying former rental vehicles that some states passed laws after extensive lobbying by groups which profit from this, explicitly allowing a used car dealer to call the cars something else. So for instance, in Michigan, they are legally allowed to call it a program car. It's a program car. There's a statute in the blue books behind me, Michigan compiled laws, that says a late model car that was a former rental can be marketed as a program car. They actually redefined a word just so they could have a word that sounds neutral to call a former rental vehicle. So if you are on a used car lot in Michigan and you see a car and says, this is a program vehicle, many people go, oh, it's probably like one of those employee purchase things or something. No, it's a former rental vehicle. Why do you call it a program car? Because the law says we can. Why does the law say that? Because we lobbied them to change the definition? Why not? Turns out the use of the term program car, now meaning former rental, is acceptable pretty much everywhere according to the Federal Trade Commission. I am leery of any transaction where a seller feels the need to use euphemisms to hide the true nature of goods being sold. And by the way, that's my opinion. And I'm stating my opinion. I am leery of transactions where a seller feels the need to use euphemisms to hide the true nature of the goods being sold. Does that upset you, used car salesman? But then again, that's just me. And for me to say that's just me, I'm saying that's my opinion. You don't have to lay awake at night going, this guy's got opinions. If you find a car for sale that has a rental history, price it accordingly. Is that bad advice? But if the seller has chosen not to tell you about the history, I would take that into account as well. And again, that's good advice. When someone lies to you or misleads you or withholds information from you, you should ask yourself not just what did they do, but why did they do it? We've all seen it where somebody tells us some crazy story, some wacky story, you know it's not true. And your first thought is, wow, what a crazy story. Second question that occurs to you is, but why are they telling us that? Why? What's that all about? Oh, it's a former rental vehicle. And you didn't want to tell us. Which, by the way, if you're a used car salesman, what's your argument going to be? You ought to buy former rental vehicles. They're great buys. Because I clearly stated these are my opinions. I think in America I'm allowed to have opinions. You're not trying to cancel culture me, are you? And this article came out so long ago that the first tagline beneath the article says, follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, at Steve Lehto. And then it says, hear my podcast on iTunes. Hear my podcast. This is back when I had a podcast and no videos. Hear my podcast on iTunes. Lehto's Law. And it does say Steve Lehto's been practicing law for 24 years, almost exclusively in consumer protection and Michigan lemon law. He wrote the Lemon Law Bible and Chrysler's Turban Car, The Rise and Fall of Detroit's Coolest Creation. So this is like 6 books ago, several thousand videos ago. And you can follow me on Twitter because I've been practicing law for 24 years. I've now been practicing law for 31. And I stand by every single word of this article. And if there's anything in this article that upsets you, I would suggest that the problem is with you, not with me. Because this is so clearly presented as an opinion piece, as somebody who's just saying, look, I've noticed this situation, I'm aware of the situation, and I would like to now pass along this information to you so you can act accordingly. I say this is my opinion. You don't have to follow my advice. I'm just letting you know this. And you should know what you're getting yourself into. And in case you're curious and say, Steve, what's going on here? Well, you should know that, among other things, I've had friends in Lansing, actual legislators, and I followed the progress of this statute being passed in Lansing. And other attorneys like myself were like, what are they doing, really? Think of that. They actually went to Lansing and said, can we please call former rental cars program cars? We'd like to do that. Okay, they do it. But even better, there was a time when some car dealerships would buy former rental vehicles and sell them without disclosing anything. I'm talking about pre-Carfax, years ago. And the only way you could find out that a car was a former rental vehicle was by doing a title search. And I had a couple cases where clients of mine figured this out. And I had a couple cases that were slam dunks, where we had witnesses and we had things in writing that were contradicted by the fact that the car was a former rental. And I remember going to a settlement conference in Wayne County. I remember this vividly. Going to a settlement conference in Wayne County, and an attorney who was representing a car dealership had been to everything before that. And then one day I go to court with my client to the settlement conference, and in walks an attorney I know really, really well, but he was not on this case, at least not that I knew of. And he walked up and said, "Hey, Steve, how you doing?" I go, "Hey, good. What are you doing here? You have a case today?" He goes, "Yeah, yours." I go, "What, you now represent that dealership?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Oh, what's going on?" He goes, "I can't really tell you what happened to the old attorney, but I'm in charge now. Let's settle." I said, "Okay." And we settled. And what had apparently happened was, after a previous settlement conference and the judge beating up this attorney really, really badly, figuratively speaking, the attorney went back to his client and said, "Here's what's going on." And the client fired that attorney and brought in this other guy who just so happened was somebody I dealt with before, who did a lot of dealership defense. And he looked at the case and he goes, "Why are you guys fighting this? You're not going to win this one. You really, really want to settle this one." And we settled it. And they wound up buying my client's car back. And that was a long time ago. And it's been a while since I've seen one of these cars, one of these cases. And largely it's because they passed that statute. And now I have noticed that I had several of these cases, and then they got the law passed and started calling these former rental vehicles program cars. And it makes it harder to sue them if they can, in fact, say we've disclosed it as a former rental car by calling it a program car. And most people didn't know that, but what are you going to do? However, I've had some people say, "Steve, you understand they passed that law because of you." I don't know that. I've been told that, but I had nothing to do with it. I didn't testify in Lansing. I didn't draft a law. I had nothing to do with it. But someone said, "Yeah, but they did it in response to the cases that you are bringing on these cases." Again, I don't know. But again, the article is 7 years old. I've been practicing law for 31 years. But apparently I upset a used car salesperson. Oh my. How do I sleep at night? Should you consider buying a former rental car? Probably not. By Steve Lehto on Jalopnik. Questions, comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law.
Mr. Lehto, have you taken car me out for a spin yet this year?